Hi everybody. This is a show round of the new LoMo 2.0 canvases. I'm Carrie Bedingfield and I will be talking you through the new canvases we've created as part of LoMo 2.0. So a quick reminder of who I am. I've been making ways to get things done in complex post-industrial workplaces for about 20 years. You might know me through One Fish, Two Fish or through 50th Generation. But I'm also currently a PhD candidate in engineering, of all things, at Cambridge University. And my research is in the dynamics that happen in meetings as part of a system of getting stuff done. And this has really influenced some of the work that we've been doing on LoMo. So let's talk through what that looks like. I'm going to talk you through the new canvas after I've given you a little catch up on our thinking to date. If you want to look at the canvas in its entirety, you can download it for yourself right now on the LoMo website, which is www.lomomeetings.co.uk. And if you go to Get Started, you can download the PDF without signing in or anything else immediately. And you might find that's more helpful looking at it in one place than it is through the slides. So when I decided to tackle meetings about 3 years ago, one of the questions I used to ask people in the spirit of appreciative inquiry is, what's your favourite meeting? And somebody said to me a while back, well, that's like asking, what's my favourite injection? So I stopped asking that question after a while for fear of just irritating others and myself. But when I ask people what they find frustrating about meetings, they have a whole load of reasons. And here are just a handful of them. And you can see that they range all the way from very practical, tangible things like being too cold, being hungry, not being able to hear the other person, not being able to see the other person, right through to frustrations with the process. So I don't feel like we're getting to the point quickly enough. And also through to some quite identity status-based issues. And my belief is that meetings are a place in which identity is reinforced, it's built or destroyed, it's where relationships are tested, emboldened, and it's a kind of petri dish in which the culture and dynamics of a group gets played out very clearly. And I always think if you want to understand what the rules are in this team or this organisation, no better place than to observe what happens in a meeting. That's where we absorb the norms of our group. So meetings are, solving the issue of meetings is far bigger than just tackling the first two of those groups, which is that they take too long and they don't achieve enough, but that they can bust our zen for the whole day. And there is something called meeting residue, where the energy and the frustration of a meeting spills over into the next activity after it. So what's clear is meetings are tribal. The literature we have so far and the studies done on meetings doesn't really help us there. And also the world around meetings has changed. So organisations are moving towards agile, which does have plenty of ceremonies of its own, towards holacracy, so reducing hierarchy, self-organising, bringing our human self to work, and a much more human-centric style of work. But meetings haven't really figured out how to embrace that yet. And there's something about meetings that resists resolution. So it's a problem which resists solution. And Helen Schwartzman, who's one of the leading anthropological writers about meetings, says this, that there's something about meetings that makes us want to control them and order them and make them predictable, but actually they are resistant to our efforts to do that. So nevertheless, we created LoMo in order to try and create some predictability or to improve the quality and outcomes of meetings. And one of my colleagues and long-time business friends, Tom McCallan, gave me this phrase, just enough structure to create flow. So LoMo is always trying to provide a light structure, as light as it possibly can be, in order to allow the right information and transformation to happen. It is a tool that's based on trust and self-responsibility. And just some credits here. So it's increasingly becoming an amalgam of my work at Cambridge, and also my two companies, One Fish, Two Fish, and the company I co-own with Unboxed, 50th Generation. So if we just do a quick flashback to LoMo 1.0, LoMo 1.0 had 11 campuses, of which you can see 4 here, which were templates on which a meeting could be based. So a group of people would agree that they were going to run a Decide It meeting, so they needed to make a decision. They used the Decide It canvas, and they would work their way through the structure in order to make a decision. Or they might decide that they wanted to start a project, and they'd use the Start It canvas, bottom right. We had 11 of these in total, and some people absolutely loved them. And for those people who were already creating light structures for meetings, these were great leaps forward to help them add to their portfolio of meeting types. However, there were a few issues with LoMo 1.0. So firstly, there were 11, and they're all a bit different, and there's really no common structure to all of them. So in order to be able to use any of them, you did need a fairly rich understanding of them. And secondly, meetings often don't divide themselves into just one category of meeting. So yes, we might run a Start It meeting, but we may not run a meeting just to make a decision. That might be part of a bigger meeting. In order to make the tools and techniques much more accessible to anybody without them really having to learn anything at all, we decided to make LoMo 2.0. So LoMo 2.0 is based on the principle that there are 3 stages in a meeting, like any good system. There are things that go into the meeting at the start. So there's people and information and intention and priorities and money, resources, people's time. It's something that happens in the meeting itself. So there's a transformation, or as we could say, magic. I like to think there's some magic that happens in a meeting, and then there's an output. So something comes out the other end. And this bit in the middle, which I'm not sure they call it magic at Cambridge University, but certainly that's what we'll call it for today. Magic is the transformation that happens when human beings sit in the same place or on the same call, are present together, that creates a shift that couldn't happen another way, or it's the best possible way to make that happen. So they create new insights, they understand each other in a way they didn't before, they create new knowledge, they put each other's knowledge together to discover something that wasn't apparent before, so something that has emerged from that group of people. They help and unblock and unlock each other. So we're looking for a transformation. That is what LoMo is all about. And one of the rules I'm playing around with is no transformation, no meeting. So if there's no transformation built into that meeting, if there's nothing that you're just simply trying to exchange something that could be exchanged another way, then that you probably don't need a meeting to do that. So that's one of the rules I'm playing around with. And my idea was that if we could get the input right and capture the outcomes better, could we improve pretty much any meeting out there without needing a specific canvas for that particular type of meeting? So what I created was this. So you'll see there are 2 canvases essentially here. There's a canvas that gets the meeting set up and positioned correctly. So it gets the same picture in everybody's head about what is going to happen today. There's a canvas at the other end that captures the outcome brilliantly. And then there's a load of stuff in the middle. And actually that's where the Canvases that we had previously created, albeit reworked, that's where they will go. So all we're going to do today is go through the input and the output. And you can see that there are these 8 templates, which are not, these are the ones that are not open source. So everything you can see here is open source. Those 8 templates in the middle are part of our paid offering. So if we work through the process of getting people to, joining people together to form a meeting in order to create some kind of transformation, let's pull out everything we can use those 2 canvases to do. So the first thing, and you can use all this whether or not you want to use the canvases to do it, or whether you just want to look at them and then use the concepts in your own meeting, totally fine. But the first concept is the idea that whatever that meeting is for, it will be in service of a broader, bigger ambition. And if we can put that, we can make sure that ambition is clear and that it's put front and center of the meeting invitation and the meeting itself, then firstly, we've got a better shared understanding of the big picture that meeting's trying to contribute towards. But secondly, there's more chance that the group will self-facilitate. So somebody might say, well, they might point at the ambition on the canvas or on the wall and say, well, if we're trying to do that, then maybe we should be talking about this. So all of this provides an opportunity for self-facilitation. And some examples of what an ambition might be. They range from super cheesy to super complex, but here are a couple if you wanted some examples, and all these slides will be available later. The second thing is then, what is this meeting trying to do? So LoMo 2.0 encourages every meeting to answer a meeting question. Now there isn't, sometimes something that isn't a question is a better statement of what the meeting's about, but the concept is have a meeting in order to answer a question of some type. And if that goes in the meeting invitation and that goes front and center in the meeting itself, again, you've got a better chance that people are clear about why they're there and that they will self-facilitate. So some examples of meeting questions. What do we need to understand before we start this? So if you are trying to truly understand the landscape, the thoughts and feelings and experiences of the people you're doing work for or creating something for, then specify that as your meeting question. What do we need to understand before we start this work? Many meetings in large organisations are really trying to get buy-in. Another word I'm tired of hearing myself say. And they're never called, come to this meeting to give your buy-in. But really that's what they are. And if that is the question, that's what you want people to do, then why not shape that up in the question itself? So come to this meeting to find out about this project and for us to understand if you will support it. You might also have some regular meetings. So there might be a meeting where you're just checking in. And of course we do have check-in as a canvas from LoMo 1.0. And if that meeting is purely trying to exchange information in a very efficient way, human to human, but not to process that information in any way, then you could say the meeting question would be, what's everyone doing? So if that's the question, then we know that we're not going to get into discussions about why they're doing it or whether they could be doing it better. So once you've got those 2 things, you can then create this very clear and helpful invitation. This isn't part of the canvas, but it will be soon. But it's a template that you could use to invite people to meetings. I'm sure some of you, and I can see some of you on this call, I will have received a meeting invitation from you, which contains much of this information. So many of you are naturally good at doing this. But here's a way you could structure it so other people in the organisation could pick up on what you know naturally. And also you are creating a format in which every time a meeting invitation comes, it's very easy to scan it So I know where the preparation section is and I can whiz through that and check, do I need to put anything in my diary to do beforehand? But as you can see, it very clearly specifies what the question is. It invites people to play a particular role. So why am I inviting you? They might say, I don't want to play that role, or I don't think I can add a lot in that role, but that's often we go to meetings, we're not quite sure why we're there. So this specifies that. And it also deploys a little bit of the law of 2 feet. The idea being that actually in some meetings, not everybody needs to be there right from the very start, or needs to stay to the very end, so you can specify that. And it also specifies whether people do or don't need to use video or sound if it's a virtual call. So often I find, I used to run virtual meetings, and a couple of people would dial in, but there was no way they could participate without being able to see the screen. And if they'd known that up front, then possibly they would have made a different choice, or we would have rearranged. So that's the clear and helpful invitation. During the meeting itself, here's how you would use the canvas. So the canvas you've already seen, we're just going to break out some of the sections. So at the beginning, there is a sign-in, there's an attendee area where each individual can put their initial in the box. That's part of creating a record along with the date. So when you take a photo of it at the end, it is as complete a record as it can be. There's also sign-in. This was always a feature of check-in, and it's become a feature of all canvases. As always, use what is useful and discard what isn't. So if your team is not ready for sign-in, don't make them sign in. However, if I highlight what it is, you might, and explain how one company uses it, hopefully that will help you decide if it's for you or not. So sign-in is a way to bring everybody's attention into the room. It signals that the meeting has started. It allows people to connect together and share a bit of information that could be useful, or could just be fun, or could be a way to dissipate a little bit of frustration or energy. So it's a round. Everybody answers one question in turn, in order. And one client I've worked with recently, which is an organisation full of very, very, very bright engineers, none of whom would say, I love sign-in. It's my favourite bit of a meeting. However, the people who commissioned the work on LoMo really persevered with sign-in. They used it in a couple of different ways because they felt that people got used to it over time, and it was a very effective way to start a meeting more quickly and to bring people's attention together. And it also was a little bit of team bonding. People shared things they wouldn't normally have ended up sharing. So you can use it for a serious purpose. You could use it to ask people how heavy their workload is at the moment, perhaps on a heat measure. Are you trousers on fire, or just kind of cool as a cucumber? But you can also use it for something quite fun, like how many slices of cake have you had, or how many times did you commute in to work this week, or miles run, etc. And of course you need to be careful that was appropriate to your audience, but you can get a little bit of kind of team chat going, and a few things that feel unique to your team. So that's sign-in. The canvas then just lays out the principles, which we won't go through in detail today, but it has all those 6 LoMo principles right there on the canvas, so they're always referenceable. And below that, at the bottom of the opening canvas, is a will and a won't section. So things we will do in this meeting and things we definitely won't do. And you could use this beforehand. So you could list out all the things that you will do and that you won't, and you could put that in the meeting invitation. Or the group could decide that at the start of the meeting as a good way to kind of rule in or out certain things that you might have gone round in circles over otherwise. If you have a regular meeting, so if you are using one of the middle canvases, like a ShowIt, then you might have a set of wills and won'ts that you always use for that, so that becomes a kind of stable, established part of that meeting. And here are some examples of what that might be. So we're going to, this might be for some kind of planning meeting. We're going to, or an improve it meeting. So we might decide on some of the things that we're going to do next, but we're not going to actually do any work today. So back to the set of 3 canvases. We've covered the first canvas. I just want to give you a flavour of what's in the middle canvases, and then I'll show you the final canvas. So there are these 8 templates. We're not going to go through them today, but what I will share is the biggest thing I've learned about that middle section. So from my research so far, my hypothesis is that there are these 5 stages or 5 swim lanes, things you can do in meetings, and they all have a slightly different mindset. They all imply a different set of rules, but we often don't clarify which one we're in. And when we get a clash of those, so one person operating from the point of view of deciding and the other person coming from a mindset of exploring, then we get frustration and tension. Equally, if one person or group is operating from the position of understanding, i.e. sharing information purely in order to open up the facts and feelings to somebody else, and somebody else, whilst doing that, has decided that they're not trying to understand that, they're trying to help, or they're trying to evaluate what that person's saying. You can see where some of those tensions, the reasons for some of those tensions we have in meetings, or when we feel irritated by people in meetings, can become quite obvious. So there are some rules that we intuitively assign to those different states. And one really simple thing you can do is to clearly establish at each stage of the meeting which bit we're in. Are we doing this or are we doing that? And make that more explicit. There are lots of techniques that some of them fall into several categories, but most of them sit under one, many of which you'll know already, some of which are unique to LoMo and many of which are not. And if you were to come and explore LoMo 2.0, those middle canvases, these are some of the things that we would do. So let's finish by looking at the techniques to capture better outcomes, capture more of the value from a meeting. One of the top box in the output canvas is decided. So one of the things we do in meetings is we say things like, oh, we should really ... or wouldn't it be great if ... or yeah, I think we better ... And it's not really clear who we is that me or you or somebody else or all of us, on whether that is a decision or not. We can be quite tentative about how we suggest or propose decisions. So good discipline is to use this section to post-it note any decisions that were made. And a good question is, do we want to make a decision on that? Is that a decision? And to capture it. And if it isn't a decision, or it's one that does need to be made but we haven't made yet, then it might go into the car park, which is just this one here. Oh, I seem to have left out car. Oh, there we go. There's the car park. So things that we would hold up over for another time. I get slightly fatigued by actions at the end of meetings, so I actually call this section next. Actions have a particular loading of meaning, but really in this section we're saying what's going to happen next. And you can put anything and you want anything in that section that you want to help you capture what's going to happen next. But often what people will do is they'll add post-it notes with initials on of things that people have decided they are going to do. So they are post-it noted over the next section. At the end of the session, a photo is taken of that part of the wall, or if you've used the canvas, straight on the canvas, and then each individual can pull away their actions and take that away with them for later. There is also a section at the bottom called Rate This LoMo. So this doesn't mean rate the canvas. That's very, very interesting data, but that's not what that's for. It's to allow everybody at the end of every meeting to very quickly reflect on how valuable a use of their time was that meeting today. Often as meetings become established, they're incredibly useful at the start, or they feel very fresh and we use all the techniques really well. And then we start to kind of break some of the rules, and the meeting drifts over several weeks and months, and the value atrophies. And if that's the case, we want to know that. So we want to kind of track that over time, not because we're rating the host or the facilitator, but because we want to use that data to make improvements together going forward. So that's the end of the show round. You can download those 2 canvases straight from the website. There is also the LoMo user group Slack group, in which you're most welcome to post questions, problems, meeting design questions you've got. But the most useful thing any of us can do next, I think, is to pick a couple of ideas and try them under the banner of experiment. So one of the things I've found in trying to implement any of these techniques is if you crash in with this is how we're going to do things going forward, or I want to try this, they often receive a slightly frostier welcome than if you badge it under the banner of experiment. So given that we have found XYZ, here's a suggestion that we try this. Can we try this under the banner of an experiment for 4 weeks or 8 weeks or for this meeting? And then at the end of it, when we fully tried it, then we'll decide if we think what we think is useful from it or not. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining the LoMo 2.0 Canvas show round. I will be available on Slack and even on email, and I'd love to hear your thoughts if you try and use any of these techniques. Many thanks.